blood. Your place is among us.
Hi, and welcome to Source Material, where we take a look at the biggest upcoming shows and delve into the books and media that inspired them. In this episode, we're taking a look at The Witcher: Blood Origin. It's a prequel set 1200 years before Henry Cavill's Netflix hit. The original books. While Netflix's take on The Witcher is loosely or closely based on the books by Andrzej Sapkowski, depending on your point of view, The Witcher: Blood Origin is a little bit of a different beast, as rather than being based on a full entry in the series, it's pieced together from snippets in different books and other media. So the stories have come from some lines from characters in certain books. It's borrowed quite heavily from a few paragraphs in the 7th book in the series, Lady of the Lake, and it's somewhat of a gamble, but it will be interesting to see where Netflix take this story. So while it's been said that the series is set to focus on an ancient elven civilization and its demise, we're more expecting it to focus on the conjunction of the spheres, a rather big event in the universe which created the mix of characters, monsters, and everything else we know. The conjunction of the spheres is the Big Bang in this universe. It's what kicks off everything we know, and it's essentially the reason witches exist in the first place. While the books don't explicitly explain everything about the conjunction, there is a little bit understood and a little bit known, but essentially what the characters know is still only a couple of pages. So again, this is kind of complete blank slate for Netflix to stick a flag in the ground and create their own canon going forward. The conjunction of the spheres. So in the world of The Witcher, humans, monsters, elves, dwarves, and gnomes all live together. And the stories come from their deep characters, their rich history, and essentially the wars and clashes they've had as time's gone on. Interestingly though, this wasn't the case until the conjunction of the spheres. This was a world-changing event which, as we said previously, is only partially understood and only partially explained in the books. There's small segments and little lines here and there that kind of explain the origins, but a lot of it's kind of left up to interpretation. While the full details aren't clear, each race essentially existed in their own universe or sphere until they collided. This left each stranded and forced to fight for their place on the continent. So if you've only been watching the series, you might not have realised yet, but The Witcher is in fact about multiverses. Of course it's about multiverses, and the dire consequences of travelling between them. Imagine Spider-Man No Way Home, but with more swords and less spandex. After the conjunction of the spheres, chaos, or magic, entered the world of the continent, allowing humans to wield its power, but this also opened the door for a whole slew of mythical creatures and monsters to come in too. In the war that followed, while the elves held the most power and understanding of the continent around them, humans ultimately won out due to their brutality, willingness to adopt chaos and change it however they saw fit in ways that elves wouldn't, and essentially their ability to breed like rabbits.
Jealous?
So dwarf warrior Yarpin Zagrin once again explains this much better to Ciri in the book Blood of Elves. A world where he who shatters the skulls of others most efficiently and swells women's bellies fastest reigns, and it's as hard to compete with you people in murdering as it is in screwing. This ties into the 7th Witcher novel, Lady of the Lake, which suggests that humans in fact came from another world which they'd previously destroyed. It's also in this novel that it's explained that the continent is on course to go through an ice age, something which we see in Ciri's prophecy in season 1. So throughout this video we're going to be referring to the world of The Witcher as the continent, because that's how it's referred to in the books, that's its name. While we're talking about the origins of different groups, it's worth noting that dwarves and gnomes existed on the continent long before the conjunction of spheres. In fact, the elves are relative newcomers as well as humans. Yarpin also explains this in Blood of Elves to Ciri again, explaining that the elves came from someplace west of the continent about 1,000 years before humans. If you want to take a step back even further, it is explained that dwarves actually came after gnomes, but again, it's not really clear how long ago that was or where they came from. So again, it's kind of vague in the books. So while it's now the main hub of life, the continent isn't the only landmass in the world of The Witcher. Technically, there's a vast ocean to the west of it and some fiery mountains to the east. So it's going to be interesting to see if Witcher Blood Origin will explain this in a bit more detail, or if we'll see anything wider than the continent itself. Ciri and the Monoliths. So The Witcher has been fairly heavily criticised by fans for making some small and not so small changes to the source material, but one really interesting addition, which will be crucial possibly, is the introduction of monoliths. So you may remember the wizard Istrid, who didn't really play a big role in the books but has been much expanded for the Netflix series. He was the first to discover monoliths on one of his digs for the Nilfgaardians. These monoliths are seemingly linked to the conjunction, acting as a portal allowing new monsters not seen before into the continent. Ciri even manages to break one with her powers in season 1, which seems to kickstart everyone's understanding of the conjunction of spheres. These monoliths weren't a part of the book series, but they're an interesting addition because it could be a way for Netflix to introduce new characters and new monsters whenever they need. It's a cool idea, possibly, but it does somewhat undercut Ciri's powers and why everyone's after her. Thanks to her Elder Blood, Ciri has the ability to open rifts and travel between spheres at will. This is the key reason why in the books she's sought after by so many. Who wouldn't want that power? But with monoliths as a way for anyone to open these portals, what does that mean for her going forward and the enemies that might be after her? Speaking of Ciri, if the name Blood Origin is talking about Ciri's bloodline, does that mean we're going to get a glimpse into her lineage and see how her powers were handed down, as well as more of the apocalyptic events that could occur when they're used by the wrong person? This was something that was teased in Season 2, and it would be a nice way for Netflix to tie the prequel into Season 3 and give us a little idea of where that's going to be heading. Season 2 also teased a possible link to Yennefer and Geralt in Blood Origin. When visiting Istrid at another dig site, Yennefer is shown a monolith that also contains the prophecy of Geralt and Ciri, meaning we also might see the explanation of this in the prequel series. Jaskia's back! As was hinted in the trailer, everyone's favourite bard Jaskia will be in Blood Origin. There's nothing to add here really, other than it's unclear what role he'll play, but we're pretty excited he's back, because who doesn't want more of Joe Beatty?
You could hang portraits off my nipples right now.
The first Witcher. So another thing we were promised with Blood Origin is the origin of witches themselves. Once again, the books actually describe surprisingly little about the origin of witches, other than human mages corrupted some chaos and started experimenting on humans to make stronger warriors to protect them from monsters. So why did it reach this point? Well, as the wars and clashes between humans, elves and monsters reached a boiling point, elves weren't really a problem anymore, but monsters were really a thorn in their side. So the mages chose to create an elite set of warriors, training them hard and using their magic to mutate them into stronger forms. They weren't necessarily happy with what they'd created, disappointed that they could only use small amounts of magic, but it was enough to be using them as weapons. These experiments led to what we now know as the Witchers, who had to go through what we now call the Trial of the Grasses. As we've seen already, most dislike and actively hate Witchers, seeing them as an abomination that are merely a means to an end and nothing more. This, along with a fairly blank slate in the story, means Netflix are going to have a lot of wiggle room to create their own canon going forward for how Witchers are created and if we're going to see more in the future. So there's a bit more backstory about the Witcher revealed in the 8th book, Season of Storms. Geralt found out through a few conversations and paperwork that Alzar in fact had been experimenting and creating monsters for centuries and had kind of accidentally landed on making witches, but conveniently for them it was just what they needed to survive the hailstorm of monsters coming from the conjunction. It's also going to be interesting to see how Netflix handle the creation of the first Witcher. There's been some changes in terms of how Vesemir feels about the creation and what children have to go through to become a Witcher. In the books, it's quite clear he's dead against it, he doesn't want to see anyone else go through it, but for the series, in Season 2, he was experimenting to see if he could in fact create the potions and the process necessary to create more. Is this Netflix looking for a way to create more characters after killing off Eskel so quickly? And again, if we find out some more information in Blood Origin, perhaps there's another way to create witches. Will that then bleed into Season 3 and show a whole new source of witches with different powers? The Witcher Season 3. So as well as the creation of the first Witcher and possibly the mystery of Ciri's bloodline, we know Blood Origin is going to discuss the downfall of an ancient elven civilization. This could tie into Season 3 quite easily when you consider Season 2 discussed the elves in a position of precarious power and having to ally with the Nilfgaardians to keep themselves safe. Their status as a threat to the humans, however, could be on the rise, and we think there's a possibility Blood Origins could be the key to that. So Filavandrel, the king of the elves, explains that his elders were robbed and beaten back by humans after being betrayed by them. This is hence why he refuses to trust them going forward. Blood Origins, as far as we know at the moment, looks to delve into the Ghost Tribe and Skian specifically, a warrior character who is the last of her tribe. Will we see in Season 3 more mention of the Ghost Tribe and possibly Skian or another character come through which will link the two together? So the Elven characters are rich and deep within the books, but we haven't actually had a lot of time with them in the TV show. So it'll be interesting for Blood Origin to give us that kind of deeper primer in the hopes of possibly seeing much more of them in Season 3. So that's everything we know about Blood Origin, along with a little bit of speculation. But if there's anything you think we missed, please let us know in the comments below. We're going to have interviews with the cast going up on our YouTube channel throughout December. And for anything else related to The Witcher, go to digitalspy.com. Bye.